At the time of putting this video together, Sting's an active wrestler in AEW, but by the time it goes live on YouTube, his career will be over, and what a career it was. The word generational gets thrown around a lot these days when we talk about certain wrestlers, but Sting truly was generational. He's the epitome of being a generational superstar, and he was able to captivate audiences through multiple eras of pro wrestling while remaining right at the very top. His popularity never wavered. He remained true to himself. And while Sting hanging up his boots is something many fans will be sad to see, it's hard to think of another wrestler who deserves his retirement as much as Steve Borden. Having had arguably the best run in all of pro wrestling when you consider his immense popularity through multiple promotions and multiple generations, having seen it all and done it all through the good times and bad, I don't think we'll ever see another superstar quite like Sting, and in today's video we'll take a look at what made him so special. This isn't a biography video. I've covered Sting plenty in the past and you can find those videos on my channel. This is more of a tribute to the man called Sting. You don't get to the promised land without a little help, and you don't become an icon without learning from those who came before you. And with that in mind, the Stinger owes a lot of his early success to the American Dream Dusty Rhodes and Nature Boy Ric Flair. Sting tried to make an impact as Flash, a member of the Power Team USA stable in All California Championship Wrestling, along with his old friend Jim Hellwig. These two would break off to form the Blade Runners. Flash would change his name to Sting, and the tag team had limited success in the CWA and UWF. Hellwig would leave the UWF while Sting would stick around, and he got his first taste of popularity when he turned babyface during a feud that featured his heel teammate Eddie Gilbert and babyface gentleman Chris Adams. Jim Crockett Sr. would buy the UWF from Bill Watts, and Dusty Rhodes, the man booking Crockett's NWA affiliated promotion, saw something in Sting, and the American Dream was careful when booking this kid. The first Crockett event that aired on pay-per-view, Starrcade 87, opened up with a 6-man tag that featured Sting, and in 1988 Sting was pushed quite a lot on Crockett's World Championship Wrestling show that aired on TBS. The appeal of Sting was easy to see: his bright and colourful face paint along with his matching ring tights, his fun, over-the-top and adrenaline-fueled promos, his desire to do good in the world of pro wrestling while captivating audiences young and old with his in-ring performances. Crockett Promotions was on to a winner, yet Dusty remained careful when booking Sting on TV. His big breakout match also happened in 1988 at the first ever Clash of the Champions show. Sting got a shot at NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair, and Flair worked his ass off to make Sting look as good as possible. This was nothing new for Ric Flair, by the way. By this point, he was a master at making guys look good, seeing as he had done it in every territory across North America while holding the 10 pounds of gold. But when you mix this in along with Sting's charisma, and when you give the match 45 minutes and air it on TV, it was practically impossible for fans not to be endeared by this young kid with blonde spiky hair and colourful face paint. The match ended as a draw, but it was mission accomplished as far as Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair were concerned. Sting was a made man after this night. Sting continued to captivate fans as a white meat babyface as he began feuding with the Four Horsemen, among other superstars of WCW. He quickly became the company's prime good guy, and the fans absolutely adored him. In particular, his little stingers would go crazy for their hero as he went to work in the ring. Dusty Rhodes would come and go as Booker, but Sting was now firmly established as a top company babyface, and along with his ongoing rivalry with Ric Flair, the Stinger would captivate further during his rivalry with the Great Muta. The Muta rivalry happened at a pretty interesting time. Sting actually joined the Four Horsemen, and he, along with Ric Flair, would take on Terry Funk and the Great Muta in a Thunderdome cage match at Halloween Havoc 89. Before this, Sting and Muta had a match at the 1989 Great American Bash. Sting defended his first singles NWA championship in this bout, the NWA television title, and the controversial match finish would lead to the championship getting vacated. Anyway, back to Ric Flair. The Stinger would end up getting kicked out of the Horsemen stable at the 10th Clash of the Champions show in early 1990 after refusing to give up his NWA World title shot against Flair. And later that same evening, Sting suffered a knee injury when trying to climb up a steel cage to interfere in Flair's match. This couldn't have happened at a worse time, as according to Ric Flair, Sting was on the road to winning the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but Ric also made a promise to Sting that the Nature Boy himself would drop the title to the Stinger when he was ready to compete again. Folks in WCW wanted Flair to drop the title to Lex Luger at Wrestle War 1990, but Flair refused, saying the only person he's dropping the championship to was Sting, and Flair remained true to his word when Sting defeated the Nature Boy for the NWA Heavyweight title at the Great American Bash in July 1990. Sting held on to the championship for around 6 months, dropping it back to Flair in January 1991 before going on to have an excellent and somewhat underappreciated tag team match against Rick and Scott Steiner at the first Super Brawl show. Sting teamed up with Lex Luger, and the Steiners won after interference from Nikita Koloff. At this point, WCW had withdrew from the NWA, and Sting would remain loyal to World Championship Wrestling, continuing his run as the company's biggest babyface. US Championships, Battle Bowl wins. He won the WCW Heavyweight Championship by defeating Lex Luger at Super Brawl 2 in 1992, and he took part in what many believe to be the best ever War Games match at Wrestle War 92. Sting would then begin a feud with Big Van Vader. Their matches were hard-hitting as they traded the WCW Championship back and forth, and their showdowns were always noteworthy due to how the matches played out. The Vader matches showed fans how tough Sting really was. It showed fans that Sting was prepared to get down and dirty when he needed to, and the matches went over so well with WCW fans that still to this day, many consider Vader's rivalry with Sting as one of the big man's all-time greatest. The years would go on while Sting remained at the top. However, a big shift at the top of WCW management would eventually see Eric Bischoff making some big waves in an effort for WCW to compete with Vince McMahon and the WWF. One of Bischoff's ideas was a primetime Monday Night Wrestling show that would compete with WWF Raw, and so Nitro was born, and Sting had no issues getting booked during that 1 hour time slot every Monday night. By now, the babyface competition was fierce. Bischoff had signed Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, and the early episodes of Nitro predominantly featured those former WWF superstars in an effort to pull fans away from Monday Night Raw. However, Sting was still very much over in terms of his overall popularity, with certain markets flat out rejecting Hulk Hogan in favour of WCW originals such as Sting and Ric Flair. This shows us the unwavering loyalty of WCW fans during this time period. It's extremely important to understand that many fans felt that Sting was simply irreplaceable. Nothing could compare to the Stinger, even if it was the biggest name from the biggest rival promotion. Hulk Hogan had support, no doubt about it, but Sting was absolutely loved and adored by fans of World Championship Wrestling. It's hard to compare it to anything else because there really wasn't anything like it when it came to how fans felt about Sting in WCW. In 1996, times are changing and Eric Bischoff strikes gold with the creation of the New World Order. The days of the white meat babyface are slowly dying off, as evidenced not only in WCW but also in the WWF, as Shawn Michaels defends the title as an all-round good guy, putting on good matches yet slowly seeing his fan base turn against him. The NWO come along, they're cutting edge, they're new, they captivate a young male demographic at a rate that pro wrestling had never seen before, and this faction was so deeply rooted in reality that it made fans turn the channel from WWF Raw to WCW Nitro each and every week. Sting, with his colourful face paint and colourful ring attire, was in danger of becoming yesterday's news. Now, I do remember that WCW fans were still extremely loyal to Sting. The Stinger could have very well kept that colourful face paint, and there's a good chance he still would have survived this altered landscape. But Steve Borden and WCW, with a little help from Scott Hall, gambled by switching things up and presenting fans with a darker version of Sting. Unofficially known as Crow Sting due to the resemblance Sting had with James O'Barr's Crow comic book character, a new chapter in Sting's career would begin as the once fun-loving good guy became a brooding and mysterious entity that would watch over WCW from the rafters. Now, I don't want to get into the creation of Crow Sting too much because I've already covered this in depth with my Creating a Wrestler video, and I highly recommend checking that one out because it's one of my favourite videos on the whole channel. But the big takeaway here is that Sting remained just as popular as ever thanks to this changing character. It was a gamble that paid off. Sting wouldn't wrestle on TV, instead he would show up at just the right time to fend off the New World Order while also testing the loyalties of WCW superstars. He became WCW's savior against this new faction who were hell-bent on taking the company for themselves, and this created an interesting dynamic where both the NWO and Sting had their own legion of fans, which in turn meant that WCW as a whole was doing pretty well in the Monday Night Wars. Sting was once again at the forefront. He and Hulk Hogan broke pay-per-view records when they faced off at Starrcade 97. The whole world rejoiced as Sting overcame the NWO, but things weren't as straightforward as one would expect. Steve Borden was having personal issues. The Crow Sting character almost created a mirror image of the turmoil going on in Steve's life, and on top of that, the WWF would soon start beating WCW in the Monday Night Ratings War, and that made the creative team at World Championship Wrestling try some stuff without really thinking of the consequences. Sting joined the NWO Wolfpack in 1998 and he found his voice again after joining the group. That outspoken, fun-loving Sting returned to TV screens for a brief period of time, but behind the scenes, Sting started living life in the fast lane. On screen, Sting was as popular as ever, but away from TV, he was adding even more personal problems onto his plate in an almost self-destructive manner. And so, after taking a loss to Bret Hart at Halloween Havoc that year, Sting decided to take himself away from pro wrestling to try and fix himself and the personal problems he'd been having for over a year prior. Steve Borden would find God. He found the answers he was seeking through Christianity. And while Sting came back to WCW in 1999 feeling a lot better personally, the company itself had found itself in a state of absolute chaos. Even before the fabled Russo era, WCW was a mess and Sting was right in the middle of it, feuding with the likes of Rick Steiner, Team Madness and Goldberg before eventually turning heel, which by the way didn't really go down all that well with WCW fans. A match with Bret Hart would turn Sting babyface again, but we then enter the WCW reboot era where Sting primarily feuded with Vampiro, Jeff Jarrett and Scott Steiner. At this point, there wasn't a person in the world who could turn things around for WCW, and the company had seemingly gone into self-sabotage mode. But right up until the very end, Sting remained loyal to World Championship Wrestling, even though it would have been easy for him to do otherwise. The very last match on Monday Nitro featured Sting and Ric Flair, and it was a very fitting way for the company to close its doors. Sting and Flair had been there since the beginning, and when people reflect on World Championship Wrestling and the legacy of WCW as a whole, the first people they think of are Sting and Ric Flair. Steve Borden was deeply concerned about how the WWF would treat Sting as a character. His concerns were very much warranted when he saw how the company treated WCW superstars such as Diamond Dallas Page. So after a brief stint in World Wrestling All-Stars, Sting went to TNA to begin another new chapter in his career. Sting was once again able to shine in a new promotion and his run in TNA was extremely successful. He won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, the TNA World Heavyweight Championship 4 times. He was a tag team champion with Kurt Angle. He won Match of the Year honours in 2007 and 2009. And I'd be amiss if I didn't mention his change of character in TNA when he became Joker Sting. A gimmick shift that seems a little polarising when looking at fan feedback, but personally I enjoyed it. I can see why others would think it was unnecessary though, for sure. Sting at this point was a timeless character, and sometimes we can get a little antsy when our favourite characters change things up. The creation of Crow Sting back in 1996 felt more like a necessity than the creation of Joker Sting in 2011, but I thought it was alright, certainly nothing to get all upset about. I'd also be amiss for not mentioning his time in the Main Event Mafia, occurring before the whole Joker thing even happened. But what you really want to do is check out OSW Review's Main Event Mafia arc on YouTube to learn about the faction's entire run and why it was so much fun from a viewer's perspective. In TNA, Sting went through changes, some were subtle, some not so much, but he remained a key part of TNA and Impact Wrestling during his tenure with the company, and he got exposed to a new breed of fans during this time period. New fans who had no idea who Sting was quickly became fascinated with the icon, and his run in TNA can be seen as nothing but a success, all things considered. Sting always wanted to have a match at WrestleMania, even though he was always concerned about working for Vince McMahon. In the end, Sting did indeed sign with the WWE after the company released the Best of Sting DVD, and after Sting got featured as a playable character in the WWE 2K15 video game. Sting's arrival in WWE was shocking. Before this, you could easily bet money that Sting would never appear in the company, especially after having such a long run in TNA. It just felt like Sting was happy and content staying away from Vince until the day he retired. But that urge to perform at WrestleMania, according to Steve Borden, was a big factor in why he ended up signing. The big dream match was Sting vs Undertaker. It was a dream match all the way back during the Monday Night Wars, and it was still a dream match when Sting finally arrived at WWE. But the company decided not to do it, even though Sting said he pitched the idea. Instead, Sting would wrestle Triple H at WrestleMania 31, and Sting may have felt his concerns were warranted when Hunter defeated the Icon at the Showcase of the Immortals. As an unapologetic Triple H fan, even during the days when everyone despised the man, I still maintain that the wrong guy won at WrestleMania 31. There's no upside to Triple H beating Sting, and it really felt like the only reason Sting lost was for WWE to prove a point they would try to prove over and over again when WCW guys came to WWE, even 13 or 14 years after the Monday Night War had ended. From here, Sting would have a match against Seth Rollins at Night of Champions 2015, a match that's hard to watch due to Sting suffering a legitimate neck injury after taking a turnbuckle powerbomb. Sting's WWE run would end here. He announced his retirement while getting inducted into the 2016 Hall of Fame. On the Legends with JBL show on WWE Network, Sting admitted to putting off surgery in hopes of getting that dream match against The Undertaker, but the match never did get approved and The Undertaker would soon retire anyway. So fans never did get to see what many consider to be pro wrestling's ultimate dream match. If there's one thing sure about Sting, it's that nothing's for sure. Sting had said this plenty of times in his career, and those words echoed in people's minds when the Icon made his AEW debut on December 2nd, 2020. Sting returned during a special episode of Dynamite subtitled Winter is Coming, and how fitting was it that Sting would return to TNT, the channel where many fans watched Sting do battle with the NWO, and the channel where Sting wrestled on the final episode of Nitro. Upon signing a multi-year contract, Sting aligned himself with Darby Allin, and once again, a new breed of fans got to see Sting for the first time, and a new breed of fans were able to experience the intangible magic that makes Sting stand out as a performer. Darby Allin revealed on the DDP Snake Pit podcast that Sting initially signed up to perform only in cinematic matches, but after training with Sting at Steve's home, Darby thought that live matches were the way to go. Even at over 60 years old, Sting was still moving around quite well, and the decision was ultimately made for Darby and Sting to wrestle Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky at Double or Nothing 2021, Sting's first live match since taking the buckle bomb from Seth Rollins back in 2014. Sting did have a cinematic match before this. He and Darby had a street fight against Brian Cage and Ricky Starks 2 months prior, but the whole idea for Sting not to have live matches was quickly scrapped following Double or Nothing, and fans could once again pay tickets to see Sting perform inside a wrestling ring. It's remarkable when you think about it. AEW has its own unique fan base among general fans who are going to watch whatever pro wrestling's on TV at any given time. So younger viewers got a chance to see Sting wrestle for the first time, which really does make Sting stand out on his own. I mentioned this earlier, but your grandparents could have watched Sting during the NWA days. Your parents could have watched Sting during his tenure in WCW. You could have discovered Sting during his time in TNA. And your kids could have very well watched Sting's last match in AEW. That whole run from start to end is like nothing we have seen before in pro wrestling. Sting was there for the NWA's debut on pay-per-view, he was there for Ted Turner buying Jim Crockett Promotions, he wrestled on TBS during the boom in cable television, and from there he was a key part of the Monday Night War from start to end. He lent his credibility to TNA when WWE had no other real competition. He entered WWE to perform at WrestleMania when the company ushered in their online streaming platform. And finally, he went back to TNT to wrestle with an organization who, once again, offered WWE some competition. Sting has seen some of the highest highs in pro wrestling along with some of the lowest lows. He's worked for companies during key events and key moments that shaped the future of pro wrestling forever, and he's remained a fan favourite throughout his whole run. Again, wrestling will never see another performer like Sting. Finally, one of the things that always stood out about Sting, away from his ability in the ring, away from the face paint, and away from all his accomplishments, Steve Borden, the man, comes across like a genuine nice person who has a deep respect for those who stood across the ring from him. When doing interviews about his past or when talking about his career in general, Sting's always quick to point out that he couldn't have made it on his own, and he's brutally sincere when showing his respect. Ric Flair had a fall from grace when Dark Side of the Ring produced a show that painted the Nature Boy as a pretty unsavoury individual, yet Sting wanted Flair to stand in his corner during his final run because, in Sting's mind, he owes a lot to Ric Flair on a professional level. Sting believes he wouldn't have the life he has if it wasn't for Flair, and you know, as much as people don't like hearing the truth, Sting's probably right. That first Clash of the Champions match needs to be seen to be believed, and I don't mean watching highlights on YouTube or going over it while tapping the fast forward button every few minutes. That bout truly is a career making match, and even beyond Clash of the Champions, you had Flair promising to drop the belt to Sting in the future even when the company didn't want him to do so. Flair went to bat for Sting over and over again, so I think Sting's trying to repay that favour any way he can. Something else I want to bring up before leaving is Sting's loyalty. Here's a man who stayed on the sinking ship that was WCW because he always felt he owed the company for everything he had. In the most testing of times, Sting remained a cornerstone of WCW even when WCW was crumbling before our very eyes, and that really says a lot about Steve Borden's character. He knew the die-hard fans were still there until the bitter end, and so he remained with those fans until the cameras got turned off for the very last time. It's a shame how things played out when Sting went to WWE, and even the most enduring WWE fans have to admit that his run wasn't good. But his time in TNA and AEW proved that the Stinger was the real immortal when it came to pro wrestling, and I'm delighted that Sting was able to keep going on for as long as he did. I'm also delighted that Sting can retire on his own terms. He entered AEW as a legend, an icon of pro wrestling, and he's leaving the exact same way. He can go home, relax, think about the incredible career he's had, and hopefully he'll know that fans young and old, even fans who have passed away and fans who only got into wrestling over these past few years, everyone who watched Sting deeply admired him. So enjoy your retirement, Stinger, and thanks for the years of entertainment. I may be a WWF and WCW guy, but you made pro wrestling better no matter where you went.
The only thing for sure about Sting is nothing's for sure. It's showtime, folks!